I guess we can turn our attention now to the other part of the presentation, which earlier was addressed the court system and the rights of persons with disabilities act. I think that this would have a lot of bearing because this is critical to those persons with disabilities and their engagement in the workforce. And as a Congress, the representative body of labor, we have an interest in ensuring that every worker in Barbados, regardless of whether that person is able or disabled, has given the fair opportunity to work. So CDUSAB is extremely disappointed over the non-inclusion of the quota system in the recently passed Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act by the Parliament of Barbados. This is to be regretted as the absence of such a provision is more or less a pushback to the efforts to provide equality of opportunity as it relates to the employment of persons who suffer from disability. CDUSAB questions the change of heart and the wisdom in doing so by the legislators to abandon the idea of a quota system, the introduction of which was highly favored and supported. In reflecting on Section 24 of the Act, which addresses exploitation, violence, and abuse, there is a clear statement that persons with a disability shall not be subject to any form of exploitation, violence, abuse, including economic abuse, emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse. To all intents and purposes, this is demoralizing to the psyche of those persons who have a disability, who want to and are capable of working, and whose functionality is not impeded to the point that it significantly limited or limits their productivity. The decision not to include a quota system in the legislation has potentially destroyed many a hope of persons with a disability of availing themselves of the opportunity to improve on their economic status. This decision, made as a measure, help contribute to the emotional and psychological state of mind of those who are impacted. The exclusion of the quota system of employment raises the question of the extent to which it borders on the issue of discrimination. Part 1 of the Act, captioned as preliminary, cites the meaning of discrimination, I quote, any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability which has the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with all others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, rights, privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment in the political, social, cultural, civil, religious, educational, or any other field, and includes all forms of discrimination, including all forms of discrimination, including denial or reasonable accommodation, end of quote. Following this definition, the subsequent decision of the government begs the question as to the mixed signals that are seemingly being sent, where on the one hand, the inclusion of persons in the workplace is being promoted, but in the practice, there is a retreat from making it mandatory that there is reasonable accommodation for the employment of persons with disabilities. It will appear that the signal is being sent that the workplace community is not quite ready for the full integration of persons with disabilities into the workforce. Whereby CDUSAB accepts that aspects of its code of practice for the employment of persons with disabilities were included in the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, it is dismayed about the exclusion of the quota system. For the benefit of members of the public, CDUSAB addressed the quota system in its code of practice for the employment of persons with disabilities. This document was developed in collaboration with the Barbados Employers Confederation, the then Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, the Barbados Council of the Disabled, and the Barbados National Organization for the Disabled, and the National Disabilities Union. In that document, it was affirmed that the application of the quota system is considered as appropriate for promoting the equality of opportunity for employment and ensuring that members of the disabled community are more favorably treated in recruitment for employment. Based on the averages that the disabled community accounts for 6% of the national working population of Barbados, there should be the establishment of a job quota system under which government, as the largest single employer, allocates 1/6 of the public sector jobs to members of the disabled community, and that the private sector accounts for the employment of the remaining 5/6 of the members of the disabled community who are seeking employment. The application of a quota system should apply to students with a disability who are registered with an education or training institution so that they are better prepared for entry into the world of work. This is expected to assist in fostering better relationships between prospective employees and employers. As a general principle, the application of a quota system should apply to the selection and participation of mentally or physically challenged students in work training and work experience programs so as to remove any barriers from their participation. If it is that the consideration was not given to the ideas put forward by CIDUSA, and as we have outlined to you just a moment ago, it's understandable why a lack of preparation would have accounted for a retreat position as it relates to government not proceeding with the enactment of a quota system. CIDUSA calls on the government to rethink the exclusion of the quota system from the legislation. Further, it is recommended that government moves to have a registration system in place to ensure that those with a disability who are fit and capable of work are not denied the opportunity to be gainfully employed. I can entertain any questions for you on that one at this point. Or you may say ditto.
Not to be heard in your presentation, but could you break down exactly what the system is?
Well, the system understands now that there's nothing in law which makes it mandatory for either government or the private sector to engage persons with disabilities. They are also or remain subject to the whims and fancy of those employers who would want to accommodate them. It is true that government is has a program in place where they're offering some incentives to businesses in terms of the retrofitting of their places of work and whatever to accommodate persons with disabilities, but that has as an incentive program. I think it's either a grant or some arrangement where people have to qualify based on the type of arrangements that they've made, and they must be able to be of a certain they have to have some criteria which you have to meet in order to be eligible for the funding. I'm not too au fait with the details of it, but I know that is a work in progress. But the point is that the whole idea of having this legislation was to empower persons with disabilities, and where we are looking to protect their human rights and all civil rights and so forth, we have failed them miserably in not being able to provide them and assure them that they can be meaningfully and gainfully employed in the community. And I'm suggesting that people who are fit for purpose, people who are qualified and fit for purpose, I usually use both of those together, are equally available for work, just as any other able-bodied person is. And as long as those persons, I believe, they're registered, and if there needs to be some medical certificate or approval of their fitness in terms of the type of work that they will call upon and so forth, and then the employer can make the necessary arrangements, providing that some of them have some peculiar problems that may have a problem, they should be accommodated. But I don't think it is fair to put it out of the legislation and then tell us that, oh, we're interested about the welfare of the persons with disabilities, but we put them on the back burner and go back to think about how we can accommodate them I think that we know what is to be done. Let's do it. And there's no justification that government haven't made a song and dance about this to now tell us that they have pulled back. And I don't think no logical reason can be given to support what has been done. Because if you want to tell me that you got problems working in Jamaica, we don't live in Jamaica, we live here. Let us try to make what we implement work. We have to look at our own system, but we can't keep measuring ourselves by looking at somebody else. Because then, what are we doing? Are we looking in despair, or are we saying that we cannot do it? We should be saying yes, we can.
Our position is really not only today, not only present, but one that is futuristic. What does this say to persons, young people who have disabilities, and who are qualified and able to work within Barbados? Is it that government is saying that we can support these individuals forever through our social system? We are confused. Has government really taken on that role of welfare when these people, and we would have seen in the past, have a lot to offer? And not only to offer, but to inspire for other persons who are living with disabilities. I also, as C2SA, we have a concern as it relates to persons presently within any system, whether it be private sector or the public sector, who are working and living with disabilities, not that they came into the workplace with the disability, but a disability that they would have over time, as they live, maybe an injury on the job that progressed to be something more of concern, or as time comes, with age, something that they would have developed. What happens to these individuals? Is it an employer decision? Is it a governmental position? These are the questions that we need to know. And the General Secretary would have asked or mentioned earlier, C2SA questions the change of heart as it relates to this particular quota system. We need to protect our persons in Barbados. We complaining about the declining workforce and so on. How do we encourage these people who desire, and we would have seen them, who desire to be a part of a working system? What do we do to encourage these people to continue to strive? And today we represent this set of people. It is important. It is important that these people are not left to the whims and fancy of any employer or anyone who decides to write a report that states they're not able to work anymore. And that person has a family. That person has a mortgage. That person has to live in Barbados. Yes, we would have looked at the increase in minimum wage and so on. By the end of the day, the expenses associated with living in Barbados and being able to maintain life and being able to support, this is a concern for C2SA.
Any further questions to that? Okay. Thank you, Comrade Ryan and Comrade Dennis, for those opening remarks. In representation of our member units, we have been advocating on some industrial relations matters recently that are of concern to the Congress. And I'm going to invite you now, Mr. General Secretary, to speak to some of these industrial relations matters.
Yes, thank you very much. Colleagues in media, I think that you would be well aware that C2SA plays a particular role in trying to advance many of the concerns and issues of the workforce. And specifically related to the members, those in the public service, we do engage with the Ministry of the Public Service on a quarterly basis to try to get a number of the outstanding issues addressed. We are still at the point where we are discussing the personal accident insurance for members of the protective services and nurses. We believe that this is a particular important condition of service that needs to be addressed, or people, the persons in protective services and nurses are out there on the front and are always at risk. And although risk comes with the job, there's still something that we have to understand, that people need to be protected. And in the cases where persons suffer severe injury and loss of life, they're really left to suffer, because very often it takes 10, 20 years or even a lifetime. People pass and the matter is not addressed by whatever means that the Public Service Commission or the court or wherever where it stands comes to any decision. So we need to have this protective services, this in personal accident insurance, and we're pressing the government to move that forward. But it's still a work in progress, and we're hoping that something would give in terms of how they're seeking to treat this matter. There's an issue which we have before them as well, the bonding of nurses. This is a case where people who are at the Barbados Community College are there, and there is a strange arrangement which should be interplayed in this regard, and we are hoping the Ministry of Health and Wellness will address this issue also.
For the purpose of education, what is the bonding of nurses? What do you...
I think this is make the point that student nurses who go to the BCC, it would appear that some of them who had completed the program, because government pays for the tuition or whatever at the point, but some persons went under no contract. But then after they had completed the program, some person in their wild imagination and dream spoke to bonding persons. You can't do that when you have not done the work first and give that person that condition. And we are saying that even that arrangement, future bonding, that has to be regularized. So this is part of what the thinking is in this regard.
Meaning they're committed to work in the country?
Of course, that would be what bond is all about. But you first have to be employed. You can't be bonded to something if you don't have employment, and that is a natural course that has to follow. With regard to, we have a number of issues regarding to the suspension of both public officers, nurses and teachers in particular, we have learned some persons are on leave for 7 years plus. And this is something really, it doesn't speak well, because those persons at home, the course of natural justice doesn't seem to be moving in any speedy way, and then government has to employ persons in their place, and you're paying this person or half pay, and of course in this day and age, a person who has to survive in the economic stringencies that we are facing, and you can't say whether they're in the right or wrong. We need to get moving on in those things. We have an issue of this non-payment of overtime for nurses, and let me raise this issue of, it's coming up to a question of the legality of this thing of load-day, because there's nothing within any law about load-day, but people are being asked to work and not given back a load-day. But it's worse than that. We all understand that the nurses are being asked to work flexi time, and when flexi time comes, it's nothing. And because, in other words, to meet the shortage, people are asked to work for this thing, and they call it flexi. But that's all to it. There's no remuneration, and that is taking advantage of those in the system. So we need to address that as well. We have a situation where the BUT is still fighting over this issue of term leave for teachers. This matter has apparently been supposed to have been restored due to the whatever interventions that were made with the law courts, and I understand the Ministry of Public Service has no issue with it, but yet for some reason teachers are being made to feel that they are not to be given their due, which is a contractual issue. Already BUT has signaled that this is not going to be business as usual if it is not addressed in the immediacy. So hold tight, we will know what will come up with that if it is not dealt with as soon as possible. On top of that, the Teaching Service Commission is something that has been promised. Up to this day, we don't know if it's established in its full form, we don't know of its functionality, and this is an issue that needs to be addressed again immediately, because we are having too many promises, and these promises need to be fulfilled, because from the HR area, we need to address this is for the teachers, address teachers' matters. Then we have before us a very interesting issue where the nurses also are seeking long leave, and that long leave for nurses should be in accordance to what they provide for teachers. Because say 15 years and thereafter 5 years, we're seeking to have that. The issue of the portal, we should take care alone. This was a promise. Only today we're hearing something to the Attorney General saying that for the police is now going to cabinet. Now this was something that we thought was in the works. The nurses are crying out that this portal system, which is offered to them, that they're having issues with it. They're not sure if it's fish or fowl off here. Because again, there's no clear guideline or direction on these matters. So yes, these things are being offered to the public officers. Seem nice when they're spoken to the public domain, but there seem not to be any follow through or any action that's taken to give them a sense of comfort. We have a situation with the public holiday of pay, where we are hearing the protective services, again, that's the police, fire, prison, and nurses, they're working on public holidays. Again, they're not being remunerated for working on those days which are not the days of their legitimate work. So we have issues that we need to seriously address. The matter of the seniority list for teachers, we are hearing that this matter has not been dealt with for, although requests for this information has been on the table for more than 4 years. So we don't know how appointments are being made if there's not a seniority list that registers transparency. So the room for people who could wind their way around the system is there because there's no list. And we need to have that declaration in the interest of fairness and so forth.
Hey, listen up, listen up. National Trade Union Center, working for the good of all. National Trade Union Center, go where you know we got control. We working with